The Millionaire CEO didn't know he had twins until one day the mother of his children approached him at the supermarket and left him speechless. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. Gavin Lockwood parked his sleek black sedan in the supermarket's crowded lot, stepping out with a sigh of relief. He needed a moment to unplug from the barrage of calls and messages that had flooded his phone all day. The late afternoon sun tinted the asphalt a hazy gold, and he paused, rolling his shoulders to shake off the tension of back-to-back investor demands. He glanced at his phone, spotting a missed call from his assistant. No doubt it was another reminder of the urgent meetings looming on his schedule. He turned the device to silent, resolved to grab some groceries and rediscover a glimpse of normalcy, even if just for a few minutes. Heading into the store, he was greeted by a blast of cool air. The fluorescent lights cast everything in a bright glow that felt oddly comforting. A welcome change from the usual offices and boardrooms he inhabited. The produce section fanned out before him, rows of colorful fruits and vegetables that bore no resemblance to spreadsheets or stock values. He wandered the aisles with a small cart, mind drifting from real estate metrics to ordinary things like bread and milk, letting the mundane calm his restless thoughts. He was nearing the apples when he froze, catching sight of someone out of the corner of his eye. Dark hair with warm highlights framing a familiar face. At first, he dismissed it as a coincidence, someone vaguely reminiscent of a person from his past. But the more he stared, the more certain he became that it was her. The air seemed to shift as memories threatened to resurface. Serena Scott. He hadn't uttered her name in ages, yet the recognition was immediate. She had been an exceptionally talented web designer at his startup, carrying an unwavering dedication he had admired from afar. They'd shared a brief, intense romance one chaotic summer, then parted ways just as swiftly. She'd resigned abruptly, no explanation, leaving him with a sense of unfinished business. And here she was, in a supermarket aisle, fiddling with cucumbers in her basket as if the universe hadn't just knocked the wind out of him. Gavin's heart began to pound. He considered leaving before she saw him. This was the last confrontation he'd expected, but something glued him to the spot. In the silence of his hesitation, she looked up. Their eyes met. She gasped quietly and nearly dropped the small stack of vegetables she was holding. "Serena?" he managed, taking a step closer. Her face paled. "Gavin." "Hi." They stood there a second longer than was comfortable, neither daring to move. Then, Gavin noticed two little girls peering out from behind Serena's legs, slender, golden-haired children who regarded him with matching sets of curious brown eyes. The sight of them triggered a strange rush of emotion he couldn't name. Maybe it was shock at seeing Serena with kids, maybe it was something else. He lowered his voice, painfully aware of the tension filling the aisle. You're living here? In town?" She nodded, words apparently stuck in her throat. "Just for a while. I needed somewhere quieter. Less." She seemed to search for the right phrase and then gave up with a helpless shrug. One of the girls tugged lightly on Serena's shirt. She murmured something too soft to catch, her bright gaze flicking from Gavin to her mother. The other child clung to Serena's arm, eyes wide, as though memorizing Gavin's face. Before he could think better of it, he crouched a little to address them. "Hello," he said softly, forcing a friendly smile. "I'm Gavin. Do you like shopping with your mom?" The closest girl looked away shyly. Her sister gave a tiny nod. Something about them stirred an unexpected familiarity in him. He couldn't put his finger on it, but it made him swallow hard. Serena placed a protective hand on each daughter's shoulder. "They usually enjoy it," she said stiffly. "But we're finished here, so maybe we should go." "Right," Gavin replied, a little stung by the abruptness in her tone. I've been meaning to. When you left, Her face clouded. "Let's not, okay? Not here." Gavin straightened, noticing for the first time a figure lurking near the cereal section, someone with a phone angled precariously in their direction. It took him a second to recall the face. Tim Bailey, a local reporter known for chasing juicy stories. The man had spotted Gavin on more than one occasion, usually sniffing around for a corporate scoop. Now he was creeping around the shelves of colorful cereal boxes, obviously capturing this tense encounter. Gavin shot Tim a warning glare, then turned back to Serena, speaking just loud enough for her ears alone. "That guy's a reporter. Let's step aside?" Serena's discomfort was tangible. The younger girl clung to her leg, the older one pressing close, their mother's anxious energy apparently seeping into them. They nodded warily, and the little group slid further down the produce aisle, away from the watchful lens. But Tim trailed after them, feigning interest in a stack of discounted cereal on an end cap. His phone rose intermittently, snapping photos. Gavin stiffened, mind scrambling for a way to shield Serena and the children from the intrusion. "Mom, who is he?" asked the shorter twin in a voice so pure it made Gavin's chest tighten. "No one, honey," Serena murmured, pressing a reassuring hand on her daughter's back. I think we have everything we need." Gavin nodded in agreement, eyes flicking over to Tim again. The reporter was still there, looking far too eager. "Serena," Gavin said under his breath, "is there somewhere else we can talk? I'm in a bit of a complicated situation, but I'd rather not involve the press." She bit her lip, weighing her response. The flush in her cheeks suggested she might have a complicated situation of her own. "Look, Gavin," she began, her tone apologetic yet firm. "I'm not sure if this is the right time. I have enough on my plate and—" He couldn't tear his gaze from the twins, standing side by side, identically wide-eyed. Are these your daughters?" Serena's face tightened, and for a moment he thought he saw something like guilt or fear in her eyes. "Yes, they are," she replied slowly, picking her words. The enormity of that fact sank into Gavin. He remembered an intense weekend trip to pitch a client, the two of them brainstorming designs late at night, how Serena's creative spark had drawn him in. He'd also recalled how the relationship fizzled under the weight of his workload, how she quit without notice, how she'd never answered his calls after that. It all came flooding back, and now she was here, accompanied by two little ones who looked eerily like him. He pushed that thought aside for now. Instead, he forced a neutral expression, even though 1,000 questions buzzed in his mind. I understand." A flash interrupted the moment. Tim Bailey was lifting his phone again, a triumphant grin on his face. The reporter must have sniffed out the tension between them, and maybe he'd overheard just enough to sense a juicy lead. Exasperation lit a spark in Gavin. He strode a few paces in Tim's direction, voice low with controlled anger. "Can you back off?" Tim shrugged. "It's a free country, Lockwood," he said, raising the phone again, snapping another quick shot. "Besides, any interesting story about you is news. I'm just doing my job." Serena stiffened, her grip tightening on her grocery basket. The twins mirrored her unease, shifting closer to her, and Gavin realized this was spiraling into exactly the kind of scene he'd hoped to avoid. The last thing he wanted was a public showdown, especially with two frightened kids in the crosshairs. A store employee ambled over, sensing the commotion. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, eyebrows knit with concern. A few onlookers slowed their carts, curious about what was unfolding. Gavin took in a tense breath. "Yes, sorry, just a minor misunderstanding." Tim made a show of adjusting his phone, turning it off. "We're all good," he said, flashing a disarming smile. Serena, wanting no part of this, motioned for her daughters to follow. They edged around a display of tomatoes, aiming for the checkout lane on the far side of the store. Gavin watched them go, an unsettling blend of desperation and confusion twisting in his gut. He knew if he didn't take charge now, he might never get the answers he needed. About Serena's abrupt departure, about those precious little girls. Yet he couldn't exactly chase after them with Tim still prowling. He glanced back at the reporter who stood fiddling with his phone, an infuriating smugness about him. Gavin began walking away, then paused mid-step, a tiny seed of hope tugging at him to follow Serena and the twins, to ask the questions that had haunted him for years. Serena was nearly at the checkout. The twins gazed over their shoulders. Gavin and the girls locked eyes for a split second that felt like forever, and he could almost see bits of himself in their expressions. Then something fluttered in the background, a camera shutter sound, distinct and intrusive. Gavin whipped around, catching Tim Bailey mid-snapshot. In that same instant, Serena picked up her pace, hurrying the girls along and out the door. Gavin felt his heart hammer in his chest, torn between confronting Tim about the pictures or sprinting after Serena. And for an instant, the world seemed to freeze, leaving him stranded between two choices, each fraught with consequences he couldn't possibly predict. Gavin abruptly catches Tim Bailey snapping a photo. In that split second, Serena pulls the girls away, and Gavin is left torn between chasing after them or confronting the lurking reporter. Gavin tore his gaze away from Tim Bailey's lifted camera, feeling a rush of urgency course through him. In an instant, he decided to follow Serena instead of confronting the persistent reporter. He wove around a few startled shoppers, hurrying toward the supermarket exit, heart pounding. The fluorescent lights and the hum of checkout beeps seemed distant, as though muffled by the roar in his ears. Outside, the sky was turning amber in the waning afternoon light. Serena was several steps ahead, ushering her daughters across the parking lot. He could see the strained look on her face, the flicker of panic in her eyes. The twins, wide-eyed, gripped her hands. They sensed the tension, even if they didn't understand it. "Serena!" Gavin called, voice echoing off the rows of parked cars. She slowed but didn't turn immediately, fumbling with her key fob. One daughter clung to her leg while the other clutched the hem of her jacket. He reached them just as Serena managed to unlock her car. He could see how flustered she was, struggling to gather her thoughts. The older twin gazed up at him, curiosity and uncertainty mingling in her face. "Please," Gavin said gently, trying to catch Serena's eye. "I'm sorry for everything. But can we talk? I need to understand." Serena hesitated, still gripping the door handle. Behind them, the sound of quick footsteps on asphalt warned that Tim Bailey wasn't far off. A sheen of sweat gathered on Gavin's brow as he realized they had no privacy, no corner to hide in, not with that reporter lurking around for a sensational headline. "I don't want a scene," Serena muttered, glancing over her shoulder. The tension in her voice was raw. "I can't handle it, not in front of the girls." Gavin nodded, darting a glance at the children. He tried to smile reassuringly, but his mind spiraled with questions. "Let's move over there," he suggested, gesturing to the far side of the lot where fewer cars and fewer people would be. "Just give me 5 minutes." Serena set her jaw, eyes flicking to her daughters, then back to him. With a sigh of resignation, she nodded. "All right, 5 minutes." Gavin cast a quick look behind them. Tim was pacing near the supermarket entrance, his phone at the ready. The man wore a smug smirk, like he'd already sniffed out a big scoop. Gavin's pulse quickened as he guided Serena and the twins between two parked SUVs, out of the direct line of the reporter's camera lens. One of the girls stared up at him, her gaze so earnest that Gavin felt it in his chest. He knelt to her eye level, attempting to keep his voice steady. "Hi there, I'm Gavin," he said softly. "What's your name?" She pressed closer to her mother, almost hiding her face. The other twin peeked over, curious but shy. Serena ran a hand protectively over both their backs. "Please don't overwhelm them," she whispered. "Right," Gavin said, standing up again, heart aching with all the unspoken questions. "Serena, I never got a chance to ask you why you left. One day you were at the office, the next you were gone. Now I see you here, with them." His gaze flicked back to the twins, a knot of suspicion forming in his mind and refusing to be ignored. Serena released a heavy breath. I'm sorry. I didn't plan it that way. Circumstances changed. Gavin swallowed hard. He tried to keep calm, but something told him he needed to ask the question he dreaded. Are they mine? For a moment she simply stared at him, her expression torn between wariness and vulnerability. Then, as though a dam had broken behind her eyes, tears welled. She rubbed a hand over her forehead, nodding once. Yes, Gavin, they're yours, she said, voice quivering. The admission hit like a tidal wave, a swirl of emotions, shock, confusion, a strange undercurrent of wonder washed over him. He cast a quick glance at the girls. They were so small, so innocent, and the magnitude of this revelation left him momentarily speechless. His mind flooded with memories, late nights at the startup, stolen kisses between design reviews, the electric chemistry that had fizzled out too soon. He realized how blind he'd been to any sign of her pregnancy, how consumed he'd been by work deadlines and investor pitches. Why didn't you tell me? He managed at last, voice thick. She bit her lip, struggling to maintain her composure. Because I wasn't sure how you'd react, or if you'd even have time for us. You were always so busy, so focused on growing the company. When I found out, she shook her head. I was scared. Gavin fought to keep his voice even, mindful of the little ears listening. I would have been there. I didn't know that, she interrupted, her eyes flashing with the residue of old hurt. I had to make a choice. It's not something I'm proud of, but I did what I thought was best at the time. Gavin heard the girls shifting, sensed their uncertainty about what was happening. Their presence made everything more pressing. Suddenly, any illusions he might have clung to were shattered. This was real. He was a father. The weight of those words pressed down on him. He opened his mouth to respond, but the frantic click of a camera shutter cut through the moment like a blade. Tim Bailey had crept closer, phone pointed right at them, capturing every tremor of this conversation. Rage flickered in Gavin's eyes. He shielded Serena and the twins behind him, stepping forward with a warning glare. Back off, he growled, fists clenching at his sides. This is private. Tim grinned, obviously delighted at the drama. Really, Gavin? Looked pretty public to me. He angled for another shot, the lens aimed over Gavin's shoulder, trying to catch Serena's anxious face. A sharp wave of protectiveness rose within Gavin. He reached out to push Tim's phone aside, but the reporter twisted away, setting off a tense standoff. A few onlookers in the parking lot started paying attention, eyes widening at the clash. The older twin whimpered, clinging to her mother's skirt. Serena hugged both girls close, trying to steady them. Over the hum of traffic, the tension escalated as Tim and Gavin squared off, voices low and angry. Stop it, Serena pleaded, the tears in her voice returning. You're scaring them. Taking a shaky breath, Gavin forced himself to step back, turning instead to the twins, who wore identical looks of alarm. He bent down, lowering his voice in a soothing tone. I'm sorry, he murmured. I didn't mean for that to happen. Tim lingered like a vulture, waiting for the slightest opening to snap more photos. As if on cue, a supermarket employee stepped outside, shouting for them to break it up. Is everything all right? We're getting complaints. The interruption left them all momentarily frozen. Around them, cars inched past, shoppers shuffled by with full carts, and the sun dipped closer to the horizon. Gavin glanced at Serena, noticing the heartbreak etched on her face. He had 1,000 questions, but seeing the twins' unsettled expressions, he realized he needed to choose his words carefully. Serena, he said quietly, this changes everything. I never knew. I never even suspected. His gaze went to the children again, a strange new protectiveness stirring in him. Let me help. Let me be a part of their lives. Her eyes brimmed with tears, though she struggled to appear calm. I can't do this right now, she whispered. I need to think. The last thing I want is for the girls to be in the center of some media frenzy. Gavin nodded, wrestling with the reality that he'd lost years with these two sweet faces. Yet the chaos of Tim Bailey's scrutiny made it impossible to have a real conversation. "All right," he said softly, "but I want to talk soon. We have to figure out what comes next." Serena answered with a small nod, guiding the twins around him and toward their car. Tim tried to follow, but Gavin cut him off, stepping into his path. "Let them leave," he demanded. For a moment, they locked eyes. Tim, eyes bright with ambition, seemed to weigh his options. Then he stepped aside, letting Serena pass unhindered. Gavin didn't want to be parted from them, especially after such a revelation, but his instincts told him pushing Serena now would only make things worse. He watched her buckle the girls in, her motions trembling with aftershocks of adrenaline. As she got behind the wheel, her tearful gaze flicked to Gavin through the glass. He raised a hand, more a gesture of apology than a wave goodbye. She started the engine, pulling away from the parking space. Even as she merged into the slow flow of cars exiting the lot, Gavin stood rooted, heart heavy with questions, hopes, and regrets. He finally turned and caught Tim Bailey's face in his peripheral vision, the reporter standing to the side, phone angled in his hand, capturing the final moments of Serena's departure. There was triumph in Tim's posture, as if he'd just struck gold. A chill of dread raced through Gavin, the weight of potential scandal settling in. The sound of Serena's car engine faded into the distance. She and the twins were gone, leaving Gavin alone in the parking lot beneath an orange-streaked sky. He exhaled a shaky breath. His whole reality had flipped upside down in a matter of minutes, and the consequences were only just beginning. Gavin's phone buzzed in his pocket, likely more messages from his assistant or maybe an investor check-in. He couldn't bring himself to look at it. All that mattered now was safeguarding those children he never knew he had, and by extension, protecting Serena from whatever trouble Tim Bailey might stir. He glanced at Tim once more, who was busy reviewing the images on his phone with a self-satisfied grin. A surge of protectiveness coursed through Gavin. He might be new to fatherhood, but he knew a threat when he saw it. And Tim Bailey was definitely a threat. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the lot. Gavin rubbed his temples, trying to manage the tangle of anger, guilt, and astonishment swirling inside him. His mind drifted to the possibility of lawyers, NDAs, hush money, anything to keep a media storm from erupting around his newly discovered family. But a deeper pang inside him recognized the simple, undeniable truth. These were his daughters, and he wanted nothing more than to be in their lives. He stood there, lost in thoughts, until the last trace of Serena's taillights vanished. That one moment had fundamentally changed everything, and now he was left with more questions than answers. Could he persuade Serena to trust him again? Would the twins grow to resent him for those missing years? And how would he shield them from the relentless curiosity of a reporter like Tim? The silence of the parking lot pressed in. Tim lingered behind a distant car, phone still in hand. It was obvious he had enough photos and likely some recorded audio to spin a headline that would draw plenty of attention, both for Gavin's personal life and the startup he led. The future felt precarious, yet Gavin was determined not to let fear rule him. He stood tall, shoulders squared, eyes locked on Tim's cocky smirk. A flicker of conviction rose within him. Whatever happened next, he would fight. He would fight for his children, for Serena, and for the life he'd been blindsided by but refused to relinquish. Gavin, heart pounding, watched Serena's car disappear while Tim Bailey smirks from across the lot. The reporter clearly has incriminating footage, and Gavin has no idea how to protect his newfound family. Gavin climbed out of the hired car in front of his downtown penthouse, the city lights glittering across the windows. He stood for a moment, staring at the quiet lobby doors as his mind replayed Serena's trembling confession over and over. "Yes, Gavin, they're yours." The words felt both thrilling and devastating, echoing in his thoughts like a siren he couldn't ignore. Inside, the penthouse was still and orderly, the way he usually preferred it. Everything in its place, an oasis from the noise of corporate life. But tonight it felt empty. He dropped his keys on the marble kitchen counter, moving on autopilot as he took off his suit jacket. Flicking on a single lamp, he walked over to the wall of floor-to-ceiling windows and gazed out over the city. On any other evening, the skyline might have lifted his spirits. Now, all he saw was a blur of headlights and neon, as tangled as the emotions churning inside him. His phone vibrated on the counter. 3 missed calls from his legal team, a text from his head of PR, and countless notifications from business associates. Everyone was demanding something. Yet the only face he wanted to see was that of the little girl who looked up at him in the parking lot, or her sister, clinging shyly to Serena's arm. They were his daughters, and he'd only just discovered it. He picked up the phone to call back his lawyers. A brief wave of guilt washed over him. They'd been trying to warn him about Tim Bailey's potential intrusion into his private life. But as one of them answered, Gavin realized he could barely focus on corporate damage control. His mind was somewhere else entirely. After a few clipped sentences about, "We'll handle it in the morning," he hung up, feeling no closer to answers. A restless night passed in fits and starts. The next morning, Gavin forced himself into a crisp suit and made his way to an urgent investor meeting. Sitting at the long mahogany table, he faced a group of men and women who were all talking about the same thing, the upcoming product launch. They hammered him with questions about marketing strategy, user retention, and the company's financial runway. Gavin responded on autopilot, carefully guiding the conversation when possible, but he felt their eyes on him as though they could sense he wasn't fully present. "Is everything all right?" one investor asked pointedly. "You seem distracted." Gavin managed a tight smile. "Just a personal matter, nothing that will affect the business," he lied. He needed them calm, needed them convinced everything was under control, even though his heart pounded at the memory of the twins' small faces. Afterward, his closest friend at the firm, a software architect who'd been with him since the startup's inception, pulled him aside. She studied his drawn features and asked in a hushed tone, "Are you sure you're okay?" He hesitated. She was someone he trusted. "I found out. I have children," he confessed softly, half expecting disbelief. She raised her eyebrows but didn't press. "You know where to find me if you want to talk," she said gently. "And Gavin, take care of yourself. You can't lead if you're running on empty." He nodded gratefully, though his mind was far from the boardroom. That evening, he left the office later than usual, weighed down by both the pressure of the product launch and the emotional whirlwind inside him. Halfway through his commute, his phone buzzed with an alert for a new online article. The headline read, "Local CEO may have secrets closer to home than he admits." Gavin recognized Tim Bailey's signature brand of insinuation in the piece. There were no explicit names, no outright accusations, but enough hints to stoke curiosity among business circles and local gossip blogs. His stomach twisted as he read the ambiguous lines about young children and past romantic entanglements. Seething, Gavin tapped Tim's number and pressed the phone to his ear. The reporter answered almost immediately, as if expecting the call. "Lockwood," Tim drawled. "Nice to hear from you again. Enjoy the read?" "Cut the theatrics," Gavin snapped. "You've crossed the line. Whatever you think you have, you do not have the right to terrorize my—" He paused, realizing he was about to say, "my family," openly. "Stay away from them," he finished in a quiet, threatening tone. Tim let out a short laugh. "Or what? You'll sue me? Let's be real. Your name sells. People crave a juicy scandal, and I'm the one giving it to them." Before Gavin could bite back, Tim hung up, leaving the line dead. Gavin clenched the steering wheel, fury thrumming through his veins. He pictured Serena's face from their chance meeting. How guarded she was, how shaken. The girls must have sensed her fear. They'd probably asked her about the supermarket incident already. A fresh wave of guilt hit him. He imagined them pressed to her side, whispering questions about who he was, why their mother had looked so pale that day. An hour later, Gavin found himself sitting in his penthouse living room, rummaging through an old box of photos. He'd never been nostalgic about the past, but now he searched for any snapshot that included Serena. There weren't many, just a few candid shots from an office outing, some group pictures after late-night brainstorming sessions. In all of them, she glowed with creativity, and he stood at her side, eyes always focused on the next project. He scrutinized her expression, wondering how he could have missed any sign of her pregnancy. Had she been reaching out, needing help, while he was too wrapped up in business deals to notice? He threw the photos aside, frustration gnawing at him. Meanwhile, messages pinged in from the office, an anxious reminder from PR, a polite but firm question from an investor about personal rumors, and more updates about Tim Bailey's online gossip. The walls felt like they were closing in. Elsewhere in the city, Serena was tucking the twins into bed, struggling to keep her composure while reading them a bedtime story. She'd skip lines by accident, and the older twin would correct her, voice hushed and concerned. The little girl finally asked, "Mommy, are you sad about that man we saw at the store?" The younger twin nodded in agreement, echoing the question with her eyes. Serena's heart clenched. She offered a gentle smile she didn't quite feel. "I'm okay, sweetheart," she whispered. "You don't need to worry." But once she'd turned off the light and closed their bedroom door, she pressed her back against it, a wave of regret washing over her. She'd kept Gavin away from them all these years, convinced it was the safer choice. Yet now the situation felt even more out of control. Alone, Serena picked up her phone and tapped the name of a close friend. In hushed tones, she explained the supermarket encounter, the appearance of the reporter, and the fear that everything might spiral out of hand. Her friend offered comforting words, telling her to stay strong, to protect her daughters. But once the call ended, Serena felt more conflicted than ever. She had wanted to shield her children, yet she could see the flicker of hope in their eyes when they glanced at Gavin. That was a new kind of heartbreak she didn't know how to handle. While Serena wrestled with her thoughts, Gavin restlessly drove near her neighborhood. He considered stopping by, but he couldn't bring himself to intrude. It was late, and she deserved her space. Even if part of him wanted to pound on her door and demand she let him be the father he should have been all along. He sat in his car for a while, staring at the dimly lit windows of the nearby houses, wondering which one might be Serena's. He finally pulled away, returning to the city, a swirl of shame and longing roiling in his chest. Fatherhood wasn't something he'd planned, but now that he knew, he felt oddly certain he wanted to embrace it. The old drive to solve problems, the same ambition that made him a formidable CEO, now fueled his determination to do right by those two little girls. But the paparazzi presence complicated everything. Tim Bailey, with his camera and his prying questions, haunted Gavin's every move. The next morning, as he arrived at his office, Gavin caught sight of the reporter loitering across the street, snapping pictures every time Gavin so much as opened his car door. The tension in the building was palpable. Employees whispered, the rumor mill churned, and everyone seemed to be waiting for the other shoe to drop. Gavin pressed through it, greeting his anxious assistant and forcing polite smiles. He locked himself in his office for an hour, phone in hand, trying to muster the courage to call Serena again. He'd tried reaching her the night before, but she hadn't picked up. Now, with the swirl of possible scandal growing, he knew he had to act. If she doesn't let me help, if she disappears again. He couldn't even finish the thought. He took a steadying breath and dialed her number. It rang once, twice. He closed his eyes, half convinced she'd ignore him again. But then there was a click, and her voice, soft, hesitant, still reeling from recent events. "Serena," he began, trying to keep the tension out of his tone, "please, I need to see you. We have to figure out what's best for our children." His heartbeat was thunderous in his ears, a surge of emotion coursing through him. For a moment she said nothing, and he wondered if the call had dropped. Then he heard her exhale. "I know," she said. "We can't pretend this isn't happening. But I'm worried. About them. About Tim Bailey. Everything." The vulnerability in her voice only sharpened Gavin's resolve. "I understand," he answered, trying to sound reassuring. "I can't promise the press will just go away, but I can promise to protect you and the girls as much as I can." A subtle rustle came through the line, maybe Serena pacing on her end. "All right," she whispered eventually. "Come over. We need to talk. About the twins." Those words were like a jolt of electricity. He pictured her face and the uncertain light in her eyes as she said it. Relief mingled with apprehension, and he was already grabbing his car keys without realizing it. Serena answers Gavin's call, her voice trembling slightly, and says, "Come over. We need to talk. About the twins." A wave of anticipation surges as Gavin heads toward her apartment, uncertain of what he will hear. Gavin pulled up in front of the low-rise apartment building just as dusk settled over the neighborhood. A few children played in the courtyard, their laughter mingling with the soft rustle of a nearby tree. He shut off the engine and checked the address Serena had given him, feeling a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with business. He was on his way to see the twins again, to piece together the puzzle of what had happened years ago. He climbed the worn concrete steps to her floor, the fluorescent hall light flickering overhead. The place was far from the luxury he was used to, yet it radiated a warmth he couldn't quite define. He reached apartment 4B and knocked gently. A moment later the door opened to reveal Serena, hair pulled into a loose ponytail, eyes tired but resolute. "Hi," Gavin said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Hi." She paused, then stepped aside. "Come in." He entered a small living room with a faded couch, a few scattered toys, and a simple wooden coffee table. The scent of freshly brewed tea lingered in the air. It felt cozy, lived in, a sharp contrast to his sterile penthouse. He glanced around, noticing pastel drawings pinned to the fridge and a child's painting taped crookedly on the wall. A little piece of him smiled at these domestic details, though his nerves remained on edge. "I made some tea," Serena offered, gesturing toward the kitchen. "I hope that's all right." Gavin nodded, removing his jacket. "That sounds good." She led him to the small kitchen table, where 2 cups of tea steamed in mismatched mugs. They sat down, silent, stretching for a moment, as though both were searching for the best way to begin. Eventually, Gavin cleared his throat. "Thank you for letting me come." She nodded, folding her hands around the warm mug. "I didn't know how else we could talk. It was getting complicated." "Complicated is putting it lightly," he said with a weary chuckle. "Between my investors breathing down my neck and Tim Bailey circling like a shark, I don't want the girls caught in the crossfire." At the mention of the twins, Serena tensed slightly. "They're in their room, coloring. I told them I'd introduce you properly later if that's okay. I wanted us to talk first." Gavin's heart thumped. He realized he was both terrified and thrilled by the prospect of meeting them under calmer circumstances. "Sure," he agreed. Serena took a sip of tea. A flicker of memory passed over her features and she began, "I found out I was pregnant not long after I left the company. I panicked. You'd just closed a round of funding, had so much riding on you. I thought telling you would only add to your stress. I was scared you'd shut me out or see me as a burden." Gavin bowed his head, remembering how consumed he had been by the business at that time. "You could have told me," he said softly. "I might have handled it differently, but I would have tried to be there." "I regret not giving you the chance," she admitted, eyes downcast. "Once the twins were born, life got harder. Lots of medical bills, sleepless nights. My design work was freelance only, and every time I considered reaching out, I saw the headlines about your success, how the company was thriving, how unstoppable you were. It made me feel like I'd done the right thing to let you focus." A pang of guilt twisted in Gavin's chest. He should have reached out when she vanished, found out what was going on, instead of burying himself further in deadlines. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I never wanted you to deal with all of that alone." Serena nodded, her gaze flicking to the doorway that led to the twins' room. "They're good kids, smart, curious. You'd be proud of them." His throat tightened. "I already am. I barely know them, but from what little I've seen—" He trailed off, words failing to capture the swell of emotion inside him. The apartment's silence was broken by the light padding of feet in the hallway. One of the twins, the older one, peeked around the corner. She looked from Serena to Gavin, a question in her eyes. Serena set her mug down. "Come here, sweetie, it's okay." Hesitantly, the girl shuffled into the kitchen, gaze lingering on Gavin. He noticed the same color in her eyes as his own, a faint echo of his mother's face. Something in him trembled. "Hi," she whispered, voice small but direct. Gavin smiled gently. "Hi there." Serena explained quietly. "I was just talking to your dad." A moment passed. The little girl opened her mouth in surprise, glancing at him more intently. Gavin saw a wave of recognition, though he doubted she understood the entirety of it yet. Then the girl turned and ran back to the hallway, returning a second later with her sister. The younger twin clutched a crayon in one hand, curiosity lighting up her face as she sized him up. A subtle hush filled the kitchen. Gavin felt an ache in his chest, realizing he wanted nothing more than to scoop these two into his arms. But he didn't know if they were ready, and he glanced at Serena, seeking a silent cue. She offered a nervous smile. "Girls, this is Gavin," she said, careful not to overload them. "He'd like to get to know you both, if you're okay with that." The younger one nodded shyly, stepping closer while her sister hovered protectively behind. Gavin crouched to their level, noticing how small and delicate they were. "I'm happy to meet you," he said, voice trembling slightly with emotion. The younger twin studied him a second, then reached out, handing him the crayon. He took it gently, as though it were precious. Her sister peered over Gavin's shoulder at the drawing on the table, a wobbly outline of a house with 4 stick figures. Serena's voice came softly from above, explaining, "They like to draw our family. I guess now it makes a little more sense for them to include you too." Gavin swallowed the lump in his throat. "I'd like that," he whispered. "I'd like to be part of your picture." Serena blinked back tears, drifting into a quiet moment that spoke louder than any confession. They all stayed like that for a heartbeat, Gavin kneeling, the girls eyeing him with curiosity and half-smiles, Serena watching with guarded relief. Eventually, she guided the twins back to their room, promising they'd all talk more soon. Gavin returned to the table, heart racing from the surreal encounter. He felt an overwhelming protectiveness, not just over the girls, but over Serena as well. Whatever had gone wrong, however they'd failed each other in the past, he was determined to do better now. The moment was cut short by the buzz of Serena's phone. She glanced at the screen, frowning. "It's Tim," she muttered, face tightening. "He's been calling non-stop. I stopped answering." Gavin tensed. "He's relentless," he said. "It's not just about pictures or gossip. He smells a big story, and someone might be pulling his strings. I'm worried about you and the girls." Serena folded her arms, doubt flickering in her eyes. "That's exactly why I stayed away from you in the first place." "I know," Gavin said, the guilt creeping back in, "but I won't let them get to you. If we work together, maybe we can keep the girls safe. We can figure out co-parenting without feeding the tabloids." She watched him carefully, as though assessing if this was the same workaholic boss she once knew. His eyes shone with resolve, and she found herself believing in his sincerity. "All right," she conceded. "We can try to sort this out, but I'm not risking my daughter's well-being for anything. Not your company, not your reputation." Nothing. Gavin nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He rose from his seat, picking up his jacket as Serena followed him to the door. His gaze flicked to the twins' bedroom, where faint giggles from behind a half-closed door gave him hope. "Thank you for letting me in," he murmured. "I promise I won't take this second chance for granted." She gave a tight but genuine nod. "I'll hold you to that." He stepped out into the hallway and paused, looking back. The soft light from the apartment cast a warm glow on Serena's features, making him marvel at how much had changed since the last time they'd spoken. He felt a flicker of something, an echo of the affection that once drew him to her. But it was tangled with regret and a fierce desire to protect what they had created together, those two bright, innocent children. "Let me know if anything happens," he said, adjusting his jacket. "Tim Bailey or anyone else, if you feel threatened in any way." She nodded. "I will." Then she closed the door gently. Gavin turned down the hallway, nerves still buzzing from the weight of that conversation. Each step felt like a move closer to the life he should have known long ago. He made it down the building's front steps and onto the sidewalk, the evening sky tinged with purple overhead. A sense of relief battled with the anxiety swirling in him. He couldn't shake the feeling that Tim was lurking in the shadows somewhere, waiting for his next opportunity to pounce. Sure enough, as Gavin approached his car, he caught a flash from the edge of his vision. Across the street, a dark sedan idled, headlights off. A silhouette sat behind the wheel, raising a camera just as Gavin glanced over. A bright flash blinked in the darkness, igniting a flare of anger and dread in Gavin's stomach. A quick snapshot's flash from Tim's car windows startles Gavin. It's clear the reporter has fresh material that could blow everything wide open. Gavin sank behind the wheel of his car, pulse racing as he watched the flash fade across the street. Tim Bailey's dark sedan pulled away, headlights off, vanishing into the night. For a long moment, Gavin sat in silence, the engine idling. A deep fear for Serena and the twins hollowed out his chest. The reporter was growing bolder by the day, no longer content to linger on the fringes for photographs. He was brazenly stalking them. He exhaled slowly, then pulled out of the neighborhood. On the ride back to his penthouse, he tried to settle his thoughts, but every time he imagined Serena and the girls, he felt that cold prickle of worry again. Had Tim found them so quickly, just by following Gavin? Did he already know where the twins went to school? A sick sense of dread began to twist through him. Gavin got home to a barrage of messages. Most were from his company's board members, urgent and insistent. He scrolled through the notifications until one investor's text in particular caught his attention. "We need to speak first thing tomorrow. Negative press is building." Slumping onto his living room couch, he flipped on the news. His heart pounded when he caught a glimpse of Tim Bailey on the local station, crouched outside a city office building, microphone in hand, giving an interview. The scrolling caption teased, "Scandal, secrets, and a high-profile CEO." Although the segment cut away before revealing details, Gavin could guess where it was heading. He switched the television off, frustration tightening his jaw. Someone was fueling Tim's zeal for a story. This ran deeper than a nosy reporter sniffing out personal drama. Gavin could feel the orchestrated nature of it, the drip of cryptic blog posts, the constant presence of cameras, the rumors swirling around his private life at precisely the worst time for his company. In the morning, an urgent board meeting awaited him at headquarters. Gavin walked into the sleek glass building earlier than usual, scanning the sidewalk for any sign of paparazzi or Tim's car. To his relief, no one was outside. Still, he felt uneasy. Inside, the energy was different. Employees were whispering, glancing at him with uneasy curiosity. Snippets of conversation reached his ears. "Did you see the blog post? He might be in trouble. The startup's launch is next week. What if investors bail?" His assistant met him in the lobby, greeting him softly. "They're waiting for you, sir. They seem agitated." Steeling himself, Gavin took the elevator up. When the doors slid open on the executive floor, he was confronted by several stern faces. The tension was palpable. A senior board member cleared his throat. "Gavin, we need an update. The speculation around your personal life is increasing and it's threatening our new product launch. Some major investors are jittery about negative publicity." Gavin set his briefcase on the table, choosing his words carefully. "I'm aware of the rumors. They're not entirely unfounded. I do have personal matters that came to light recently, but I'm handling it privately. None of it will harm the product launch or the company's performance." Another board member, a woman with a reputation for straightforward criticism, leaned forward. "Can you guarantee that? People are talking about children out of wedlock, a secret relationship, some kind of hidden family. We can't afford scandal right now." Gavin bristled at the callous way she framed the situation but suppressed the surge of anger. "I'm taking steps to protect my family from media intrusion. Tim Bailey's unscrupulous tactics aren't just about me. They're about making a splash, and I suspect he's being backed by someone who wants to destabilize this company. As for the product launch, the timeline remains intact." He sensed their skepticism, but after a few tense exchanges about release dates, marketing spend, and strategic partnerships, the board grudgingly moved on. A plan was agreed upon. Gavin's PR team would issue a brief statement denying malicious gossip, and he would maintain a low profile. Still, he could see the worry etched into their faces. One slip, one more damaging article, and they might insist on replacing him as CEO. As soon as he left the meeting, his phone chimed with a call from a local security firm he'd contacted the previous night. They confirmed they could provide surveillance around Serena's apartment if needed. He was desperate to shield her and the twins, but also terrified that bodyguards at their doorstep might draw even more attention from reporters. He turned into his office, finding it hard to concentrate on the day's tasks with Tim's shadow looming. At his desk, he swiftly typed out an email to Serena. "Please be careful. If you need security, say the word. Don't let Tim corner you." She didn't reply immediately. He feared she was upset at the idea of hired muscle outside her home, or worse, that Tim had tried to contact her already. He forced himself to push through a stack of paperwork, brainstorming damage control strategies with his PR team. Though outwardly calm, he felt a knot of tension coiling tighter by the minute. That evening, as the sky darkened, he slipped out of the building through a side entrance to avoid any waiting photographers out front. Once in his car, he dialed Serena's number. She answered on the fourth ring, voice hushed. "Hi," she said, sounding tired. He heard movement in the background, maybe the twins running around or the shuffle of dinner plates. "How are you holding up?" he asked gently. She hesitated before replying. "We're okay for now. I've tried to ignore the calls from unknown numbers, just focusing on the girls." He rubbed his temple. "Good. Keep ignoring anything suspicious. Let me know if you feel unsafe." A lull followed as they each wrestled with the complicated new reality. Then she spoke again, voice firm. "If Tim shows up here, or if any reporters harass the twins, that's it. I can't live in fear for their safety. I'll pack up and leave town if I have to, Gavin." He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her words. "I understand," he murmured. "But I hope it won't come to that. We'll find a way to stop him." They said goodnight, and Gavin drove home with that uneasy tension still clinging to him. By the time he reached his penthouse, it was nearly 9. As he stepped off the elevator, he spotted a figure standing at his door, Tim Bailey, phone in hand, leaning casually against the wall. Anger sparked instantly in Gavin's chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. "What are you doing here, Tim?" Gavin asked coldly, walking toward him. The reporter's lips quirked into an infuriating smile. "I just wanted to ask a few follow-up questions," he said. "Perhaps you'd like to clarify some details about a certain pair of twins." Gavin felt his jaw tighten. "Get off my property, or I'll have you removed. There's nothing to clarify." Tim's eyebrows rose, enjoying the confrontation. "Interesting. That's not what my source says. I hear these girls are definitely yours, And you've been keeping them hidden. That's quite the scandal." Gavin refused to dignify it with a direct response. "I'm calling security," he snapped, taking out his phone. Tim waved a dismissive hand. All right, I can see I'm not welcome. But I'll be around, Lockwood. People want to know the truth, and I'll be the one to give it to them." A moment later, Tim vanished into the elevator, the doors sliding shut with a cruel finality. Gavin stood in the corridor, breathing hard. His hands shook slightly from the effort of keeping his temper. It was clear Tim would stop at nothing, and each new level of harassment only fueled Gavin's desperation to protect Serena and the twins. The next few days passed in a tense blur. Gavin juggled frantic investor calls, PR containment, and his repeated attempts to reassure Serena that all would be well, though he was far from sure himself. Paparazzi started cropping up in places they'd never bothered to visit before, near the twins' school, outside the coffee shop Serena frequented. She grew more anxious, calling Gavin one evening in tears. "There are reporters knocking on our neighbors' doors, asking questions about us. The twins are frightened." He tried to calm her, promising he'd help her hire legal counsel, do anything to keep the press away. But he sensed her growing frustration, and with it the very real possibility that she might decide to leave the city altogether. That same night, Gavin resolved to confront Tim again, this time with a direct threat of legal action. He was done playing nice, done tiptoeing around the man's lurid attempts to spin a story. But before he could track the reporter down, an urgent text from Serena arrived. "Come quick, he's here." Alarm pounded through him. He abandoned his half-written email and raced to his car, images flooding his mind of Tim cornering Serena, or worse, frightening the twins. He drove recklessly, weaving through traffic until he reached her building. His heart hammered as he ran up the stairs, only to find her door locked, the corridor quiet. Was he too late? Down the hall he heard timid footsteps. A neighbor peered out, shaking his head as if confused. "Some guy with a camera showed up, but he's gone now," the neighbor mumbled. Relief warred with anger. Gavin thanked him and knocked softly on Serena's door. After a moment she opened it, her expression stiff with residual fear. "He pounded on my door, demanding I answer questions," she said, voice trembling. "I told him to leave, but I was so scared." He enveloped her in a quick embrace, noticing the twins peeking from the couch. They looked upset, tears threatening to spill from their eyes. He gave them a gentle, reassuring nod, lips pressed in a thin line of frustration. "Tim won't stop," Gavin said quietly, "but we'll figure this out together. I promise." Serena nodded, leaning against the door frame to steady herself. "I just want this nightmare to end." Before Gavin could reply, the phone on the coffee table lit up once more. Another unknown caller, another round of harassment. Serena glowered at the screen, ignoring it. As the soft ring died away, she knelt by the twins, attempting to reassure them while Gavin kept watch from the window. By the time the girls were tucked into bed, exhaustion filled the tiny apartment like a heavy fog. Gavin lingered at the kitchen table, flipping through security firm brochures and legal contacts. Serena joined him, hair pulled up in a messy bun, eyes red-rimmed. "We can't live like this," she whispered. "I don't want them afraid every time the doorbell rings." Gavin squeezed her hand. "I'll talk to the lawyers. We'll file a restraining order if possible, and I'll find out who's funding Tim. He can't be acting alone." Serena nodded. She started to thank him but was cut off by the sudden insistent buzz of the doorbell. They both froze, exchanging alarmed glances. The twins stirred in the other room. One of them called, "Mommy?" in a worried voice. "It's okay," she called back, swallowing hard. She looked at Gavin, dread pooling in her eyes. "Could you stay here with them, just in case?" He rose to stand by the hallway, bracing himself for yet another confrontation. She approached the door quietly, heart hammering, half hoping it might be a neighbor with a misplaced package or even Gavin's security detail. She pressed an eye to the peephole. No friendly face. Carefully, she unlocked the chain and cracked the door. Tim Bailey leaned in the doorway, camera in hand, smirking. "Evening, Serena. Care to give me a statement?" Serena's doorbell rings. She opens it cautiously, expecting Gavin or a neighbor, only to find Tim Bailey, leaning against the frame, camera in hand, demanding a statement right then and there. Serena's heart pounded the instant she recognized Tim Bailey's smug face. There he stood, bold as ever, his camera raised and flashing. He leaned against the frame of her front door like an uninvited guest who knew he couldn't be turned away. In the living room behind her, Gavin stood tensely, ready to intervene. The twins were further down the hall, their small voices hushed as they sensed the commotion. Tim gave Serena a mocking half-smile. "Got a minute?" he asked in that goading tone that made her chest tighten. He peered past her as if expecting a dramatic scene. "I'm looking for a statement regarding Mr. Lockwood's latest claim. It seems your daughter's—" "Stop it," Serena interrupted, voice trembling with anger. She held the door only a few inches open, determined not to let him see or approach the twins. "You need to leave. Now." Tim made no move to step back. "Why so tense? I'm sure the public would love to hear your side of the story." From the hallway, Gavin drew closer, every muscle rigid with protectiveness. "You heard her," he said quietly but firmly. "Leave." Tim glanced toward him and shrugged as if this were a casual visit. "I'm just doing my job, Lockwood. People talk, I dig, no reason to make it personal." Serena shot him a glare. "You show up at my door with a camera after dark. That's as personal as it gets." Tim sighed theatrically, clicking his camera off and slipping it into his jacket pocket. "I could have run this piece a long time ago, but I'm trying to be fair. If you'd answer my questions, maybe we could clear everything up." Gavin placed a hand on the door, gently pushing it closed. Tim took a half-step back, though he still wore that smug expression. "We have nothing to say to you," Gavin warned. "Unless you want a restraining order, I suggest you keep your distance." Tim raised both hands in feigned surrender, as though Gavin were overreacting. "All right, have it your way. But this story's not going away just because you don't like me asking questions." Then he added quieter, "And if you think I'm the only one digging around, you're sorely mistaken." Serena felt a chill ripple over her. "What's that supposed to mean?" Tim smirked. "You'll see," he said, then pivoted on his heel and strolled down the hallway. He didn't bother looking back, confident they couldn't stop him. Serena stood there with her hand gripping the doorknob, knuckles white. Her breath came in short bursts, and she fought the urge to collapse from the mix of fear and anger. Gavin eased the door shut and bolted it. "It's okay," he murmured gently. "He's gone." She shook her head, forcing herself to breathe. "He won't give up, and he's not alone in this. Who else is behind him?" Gavin could see the terror in her eyes. He tried to steady her, pulling her into a brief, awkward hug. "I'll find out," he promised, "but you and the twins won't face him alone. Not anymore." From the living room, one of the twins called out, "Mommy, what's happening?" Her small voice cracked in worry. "Just stay there, sweetheart," Serena answered, unclasping herself from Gavin. She went to comfort her daughters, pulling them close on the couch. The younger twin clung to her like a lifeline, while the older one stared at Gavin with wide eyes, as though she could sense the tension despite her young age. Gavin crouched down beside them, face softening. "It's late," he said gently. "Maybe we should get you two back to bed?" The girls looked to their mother. She brushed a hand over their hair, smiling sadly. "Yes, sweethearts, let's try to rest. I'll be in to tuck you in again." They nodded reluctantly and shuffled off to their bedroom, still glancing back at Gavin. He stayed on the floor, elbows on his knees, processing the surge of emotions. The quiet footfalls of the twins disappeared behind a door, leaving him and Serena in an uneasy hush. Serena sat heavily on the arm of the couch. "He knows where we live. He's determined to paint a picture of some scandal. I don't know how much more I can take." Gavin stood and rubbed the back of his neck. "We need a better plan. Security, Legal options, something. You shouldn't have to do this alone. She nodded, her eyes turning hollow with exhaustion. I know, but I'm afraid more people will just escalate things, bring more attention on the girls. He understood her worry. Bodyguards or any overt sign of protection could make the paparazzi swarm like sharks to blood. The only solace was that Tim Bailey had left, tonight at least. They exchanged a few more words, forging a tentative plan to call his legal team in the morning. Then Gavin said a quiet goodnight, slipping out the door while the hallway was empty. He refused to let Tim rattle him further, but fear and anger gnawed at him as he drove home. The next day, Gavin found himself back in the thick of corporate fires. He entered his office to find a colleague waiting anxiously. "The board wants an update on the product timeline," she said in a hushed tone. "They're spooked by these rumors." Gavin forced a curt nod. "I'll handle it," he replied, stepping into a conference call with leading investors. Voices overlapped with pressing questions. "Are you still committed to the launch? Should we postpone until negative press subsides? Is there risk of a lawsuit from this alleged mother?" He gave measured, reassuring answers, all the while haunted by images of Serena's anxious face and Tim Bailey's camera flashing in the hallway. As soon as he ended the call, Gavin dialed his PR representative. They discussed strategies for controlling the story, a potential statement claiming the issue was private, a denial of any wrongdoing, but every suggestion felt hollow. This wasn't just a rumor. There were real people, real children, at stake. After lunch, he met with a lawyer to explore restraining orders. The process sounded lengthy. "It'll buy some time," the lawyer explained, "but if Tim is well funded by someone else, he can sidestep direct confrontation and keep digging." Gavin left the meeting frustrated, imagining Tim lurking around corners, camera ready. Across town, Serena tried to maintain normalcy for her daughters. She walked them to school, trying to appear cheerful as she pointed out bright flowers or joked about silly traffic noises. But a coil of dread tightened inside her every time she glanced over her shoulder, expecting to see Tim's face or another unknown figure. By the time she got home, her nerves were raw. She kept the door locked, curtains drawn, and her phone on silent. Hours later, just before she planned to leave and pick up the twins, a knock sounded at the door. Her heart jumped. She peered through the peephole only to find a man in a suit, accompanied by another, both holding folders. Her gut clenched, imagining they were reporters in disguise. Reluctantly, she inched the door open, the chain still secured. "Good afternoon," the taller of the two said politely. "We're from Lockwood Enterprises Security Division. Mr. Lockwood asked us to come by." She felt a wave of relief, but also a twinge of irritation that Gavin hadn't warned her. "He didn't mention this," she said, peering at the men's identification. "You're sure he sent you?" One man offered a reassuring smile. "Yes, ma'am. We're here to discuss possible safety measures around your residence." Serena hesitated, but let them into her living room. For the next half hour, they presented risk assessments, highlighting the benefits of having a rotating guard outside the building or at least a drive-by surveillance. Serena felt her anxiety rise again. "This seems too intense," she mumbled, imagining a stream of uniformed strangers outside. "I don't want to turn my home into a fortress." They exchanged looks, respectful but firm. "Ma'am, with a persistent reporter like Tim Bailey, it may be necessary to deter him physically. Our approach is discreet. We wouldn't announce ourselves." She closed her eyes, thinking of the twins. Discreet or not, cameras had a way of capturing everything. "I'll think about it," she said, escorting them out. As she shut the door behind them, she let out a shaky breath. Even if their presence could provide a buffer, the cost of that sense of safety might be a barrage of new gossip. Tim would label her paranoid or claim that Gavin was intimidating the press. Later, after she picked up the twins from school, Serena lingered near the gates, scanning for cameras or lurking strangers. The girls, oblivious to the deeper tension, prattled on about their day, colorful drawings, new songs they'd learned, the friend who shared cookies at lunch. She squeezed their hands, grateful they could still enjoy the innocence of childhood despite the chaos swirling around them. Just as they reached home, her phone buzzed. An unknown number again. She considered ignoring it, but something told her to pick up. She answered cautiously, half expecting Tim's voice. Instead, it was a female journalist from a local station, sounding pleasant but insistent. "Ms. Scott, we'd love an exclusive interview. Just a friendly chat about your relationship with Gavin Lockwood." Serena's heart sank. "No, thank you," she said, and hung up. She clenched her phone, tears of frustration welling up. This wasn't going to stop. Every day the scrutiny grew worse, and a fresh wave of anger welled in her. Gavin's wealth might buy bodyguards or attorneys, but it couldn't shield them from relentless speculation. Elsewhere, Tim Bailey was indeed stepping up his pursuit. He'd discovered that hint of a sponsor, someone feeding him resources, pointing him to leads. The payoff was lucrative, so he harassed every possible angle, determined to unearth enough dirt to guarantee a front-page scandal. By nightfall, Gavin was pacing his penthouse, checking in with a contact who hinted that Tim's big money might be coming from a rival investor. "I heard rumors," the contact said in a low voice over the phone. "A competitor who's not happy about your new product. Maybe they think if they stir up personal drama, your launch will crash." Gavin felt a flare of anger. It wasn't just about exposing his fatherhood to the world. It was an orchestrated attack on his entire livelihood. "I need proof," he muttered. "Otherwise, Tim and his backer can keep twisting the knife indefinitely." He ended the call and tried to breathe. He thought of Serena, how the stress weighed on her. He longed to see the twins again without fear of a camera in their faces. At that moment, his phone rang. Glancing at the screen, his stomach dropped when he saw Serena's number. "Serena?" he answered swiftly. Her voice sounded frantic, laced with panic. "Gavin, thank God," she whispered, almost breathless. "Something just happened. The girl's bedroom window was pelted by stones, and when I looked outside I found a threatening note taped to the building door." Her voice cracked, tears threatening to erupt. "I can't do this anymore. I'm taking them away." Gavin drove through the night with only one thought hammering in his mind. Serena was about to disappear again, and this time he might not be able to find her. The tires hummed against the asphalt as he wove through darkened streets, ignoring traffic lights that seemed too slow. Headlights reflected off windowed storefronts, casting fleeting shadows across the passenger seat. His phone lay there, silent now, but her panicked words echoed inside him. Someone had thrown stones at the girl's bedroom window, left an ominous note. She was done. She was leaving. He pulled up outside Serena's apartment building and leaped out, slamming the car door before racing inside. The lobby stood quiet and deserted except for a flickering overhead light. Every muscle in his body tensed as he remembered the last time he'd rushed here, only to find Tim Bailey lurking. Tonight the walls felt even more oppressive. Reaching her floor, he found Serena's door ajar. A single lamp glowed in the living room, revealing open suitcases scattered across the floor and clothes hastily tossed inside. The smell of tears and raw fear hung in the air. He called her name, voice breaking with urgency. She emerged from the girl's bedroom, pressing a small jacket to her chest. Her eyes were red-rimmed, hair disheveled. The twins hovered behind her, clinging to the doorframe, their tiny faces mirroring a mixture of confusion and fear. "Gavin," Serena said, relief and strain mingling in her tone. "I didn't want you to find out like this, but it's too dangerous now." He stepped closer, trying to calm his breathing. "Are you okay? Did you see who did it?" She shook her head. "I heard something clattering against the window and found a couple of rocks on the sill. Then, on the main door downstairs, someone left a note saying we should stay away from you or else." Her voice trembled, echoing with anger. "I won't let my daughters live like this." Gavin walked to the couch, where a small backpack lay half-zipped. He ran a hand over it, realizing how real this was. Serena was truly preparing to flee in the middle of the night, with the twins rubbing sleep from their eyes just a few feet away. "You can't just vanish," he said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "You told me about them. You let me be part of their lives. I won't lose you again. Not like this." She closed her eyes, tears threatening. "If I stay, who knows what will happen next? Tim Bailey won't stop. Whoever's behind him won't stop. My girls come first, and I can't risk them getting hurt." One of the twins left the safety of the doorway and padded over, her pajamas rumpled. "Mommy?" she asked in a quavering voice. "Are we going somewhere?" Serena knelt to cup her daughter's cheek. "We might, baby," she whispered. I'm trying to keep you safe." Gavin joined them, heart twisting at the sight of such innocence tangled in adult problems. He crouched down, his gaze moving from the child to Serena. "Let me help," he said gently. "Don't run off alone. If someone threatened you, I can—" "How?" Serena cut in, her voice cracking. "Security guards? More lawyers? That won't stop a brick flying through the window. It won't erase the terror every time I hear footsteps in the hallway." He rubbed his face, frustration warring with the raw desire to protect them. "We'll take the girls somewhere safer. I have resources, private properties, a place nobody knows about, at least until we figure out who's orchestrating this." She stood, biting her lower lip. "And what happens when Tim tracks us down there too? I can't keep yanking the girls around from one hiding place to another. It'll ruin their childhood." "It doesn't have to be forever," Gavin pressed. "Just until I find proof of who's paying Tim. If we can expose them, we could shut down his assault in one go." Serena bowed her head. The enormity of the choice weighed on her. I'm so tired, Gavin." He looked at the twins, who clung to each other with wide eyes, uncertain and afraid. Every fiber in him flared with protectiveness. "I know," he said softly. "Let's at least talk it through before you pack the car and vanish." She exhaled, shoulders sagging. "Fine. But I won't stay if I sense it's still too dangerous for them." Gavin nodded. "Then let's do what we can right now. We'll have my security team watch the building, and first thing tomorrow I'll push for a restraining order. We'll ask the police to investigate the note. Anything to buy us time." He glanced around the partially packed suitcases. "And if it still looks bad, we'll go somewhere else together." Serena's eyes flickered with cautious hope. "You'd come too?" He swallowed, noticing the quiet sobs stifled in the twins' throats. "I'm not leaving you alone to run. I care about you. All of you." She set the jacket aside and wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. "All right," she conceded, though apprehension still weighed on every syllable. They spent the next hour unpacking the girls' clothes, reassuring them that everything would be all right. Serena tucked them back into bed with a story, though her voice shook at the edges. Gavin waited in the living room, scanning the street below through a crack in the curtains. A single car occasionally passed, headlights bright in the gloom, but no sign of Tim or any unknown figure. Relief mingled with distrust. He knew better than to let his guard down. When Serena emerged, her face was drawn. "They're asking if you'll still be here in the morning," she said quietly, as if the twins could hear every word from their bedroom. "They want you around." A pang struck Gavin's chest. The thought of being wanted by his daughters after so many lost years filled him with gratitude and remorse in equal measure. "I'll be here," he promised. "If that's all right with you." Serena opened her mouth to respond, but was interrupted by the buzz of her phone on the coffee table. She glanced at it warily. "It's the landlord," she said, answering with tension in her voice. Within seconds, her expression fell. "What do you mean you're worried about more damage?" She paused, listening, then sighed. "No, I understand. I'll keep you updated. Thanks for calling." She ended the call and dropped the phone onto the couch. "He saw the broken glass on the walkway under our window. He's nervous about reporters swarming. He told me to be mindful of the disturbance." She scoffed bitterly. "As if it's my fault." Gavin placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's not your fault. You're being harassed. The landlord has no right to pressure you." She laughed without humor, tears brimming. "Yeah, well, tell him that." They lapsed into a lull of exhaustion. At midnight, Gavin offered to stay on the couch, just in case. Serena hesitated, then nodded, too drained to argue. While she retrieved a spare blanket, Gavin sent a message to his security contact. "Be outside building by sunrise. Keep watch discreetly." The night stretched on in uneasy silence. Every now and then, Gavin jolted awake at the faintest noise from the street, imagining Tim's silhouette. But each time he found only the hush of sleeping neighbors and the distant hum of passing cars. Around 4 in the morning he dozed off for a while, the tension momentarily yielding to exhaustion. When dawn finally broke, Gavin checked his phone to confirm that the security detail had arrived. A short message from them read, "In position. All clear so far." He breathed a sigh, hoping Serena and the twins could rest a bit without fear. He rose to see the sun's rays filter through the curtains, dust motes drifting in the golden light. The apartment door rattled softly, and he turned to see Serena stepping into the living room. She still wore her pajamas, hair messy from fitful sleep, but her eyes shone with a fragile determination. "Thank you," she said, voice low, "for staying." He nodded. "I wouldn't be anywhere else." They spoke in hushed tones, making coffee in the cramped kitchen so as not to wake the girls. Now and then, Serena's shoulders trembled with the memory of the night before, and Gavin would rest a gentle hand on her back, offering wordless solidarity. By the time the twins woke, they found the table set with cereal bowls, the morning sun glinting through the window. They blinked at Gavin, half surprised and half delighted he was still there. The older one rubbed her eyes, mustering a small smile. "Good morning," she said shyly. Gavin grinned, heart warming. "Morning. You sleep okay?" She nodded. Her sister nodded too, though they both carried the slight wariness of children who'd heard grown-up worries in the night. But Serena coaxed them into conversation about school, about silly songs they could sing together. For a brief moment, the apartment felt like a real home, the 4 of them around a modest breakfast table, no panic in sight. But the reality of Tim Bailey and whoever backed him lingered. As soon as breakfast was cleared, Serena reached for her phone, checking messages. With a tight sigh, she said, "I need to figure out how to handle the landlord. And I can't keep the girls at home 24/7. They need to go to school, see their friends." Gavin nodded. "I'll have one of my security people discreetly trail them. No one has to know, but it's safer than letting them walk around unprotected." Serena's eyes flickered with resolve. "We'll try that," she said. "But if it doesn't work, I won't hesitate to leave. I can't put them through another attack." Gavin started to protest, but then he stopped. Her words were a solemn vow. She loved her daughters fiercely and would do anything to ensure their well-being. He had no right to question that, only to promise he'd do everything possible to keep them all safe. Before he left for work, he walked Serena to the door, an unspoken tension hanging in the air. "I'll call you later," he said softly, "and I'll push harder to find out who's behind Tim's campaign." She nodded. "I appreciate it. Just be careful." He gave her a final nod, stepping into the hallway. The security guard at the building's entrance acknowledged him with a subtle tip of the head, confirming that he was on watch. It wasn't a perfect solution, but at least it gave Serena some breathing room. Gavin only hoped it would buy him enough time to uncover the real culprit behind these escalating threats. As he stepped outside, the morning light felt harsher than usual, the sky too bright for the uncertainty that hovered in his thoughts. His phone buzzed with countless notifications, investor demands, PR queries, a swirl of corporate noise. But behind it all, he saw an image of Serena, packing suitcases in the dark, fear etched on her face, and he knew this was far from over. He climbed into his car, heart heavy, mind resolved. One thing was certain, he would not let them slip away again, No matter what Tim or anyone else threatened, they deserved a future free from chaos, and he intended to find a way for them to have it. Just as Gavin closes the door, Serena receives a mysterious text. "We know where you'll run. You can't hide." Her face goes pale. Their escape plan might be compromised already. Gavin's breath caught when he saw the text that had lit up Serena's phone, threatening that whoever was behind all this already knew her plans to flee. She stood in the apartment doorway, eyes wide, knuckles turning white around the phone. A chill seemed to pass between them. "We can't stay here," she whispered, stepping back into the living room where suitcases were still half-packed. The twins were in another room, not quite understanding the new wave of dread blanketing the apartment. He steadied her with a hand on her shoulder. "Let's breathe for a second," he said gently. "Remember, we're not alone in this. Security is outside. I'll call them. Maybe they can trace the message." Serena exhaled shakily. "Sure. Let's try." She handed him the phone, biting her lip as she glanced at the suitcases again. "I really want to go, Gavin. It's only a matter of time before something worse happens." He nodded, not knowing how to assure her that everything would be all right. In truth, he felt as though the walls were closing in, yet he forced a calm front, punching in a call to his security contact. As he spoke, Serena hovered beside him, eyes darting to the children's bedroom door. He explained the threatening text, the near-constant sense of being watched. The security officer said they'd do what they could to investigate, but these messages often came from burner phones, a dead end. Hanging up, he turned back to Serena. "They'll look into it," he said softly. "For now, let's stay alert. No sudden moves until we know more." She pressed her lips together, torn. Finally, she nodded. "All right," she whispered, "but I won't wait around if anything else happens." "I understand." They lingered there, the tension thick. Outside, the late morning sun filtered through the blinds, but it felt more like twilight inside the cramped apartment. Eventually, the twins emerged, cautiously peeking around the corner. Serena forced a small, reassuring smile, inviting them to the kitchen for breakfast. Gavin put on a brave face as he helped pour cereal, but inside, his thoughts were already spinning toward the next problem. Tim Bailey's relentless pursuit, the investor doubts, and that anonymous sponsor who seemed intent on destroying him. He excused himself to the hallway, stepping outside for a moment to gather his thoughts. The day had barely begun, and he felt battle-worn. A text from his CTO buzzed on his phone, asking him to come by the office to review some urgent documents, something about a sudden spike in suspicious online mentions of their upcoming product. Gavin sighed. This was precisely the kind of problem that could snowball if left unattended, and the timing was too coincidental to be just internet chatter. He stuck his head back inside the apartment. "I need to handle a crisis at work. Will you be okay here?" Serena frowned, tension crossing her features. "Just don't disappear for too long." "I won't." He said goodbye to the twins, pausing to rest a comforting hand on each daughter's shoulder. Their trustful eyes reminded him of all he had to protect. Then he hurried out, scanning the street before driving off, mindful of any trailing cars. At the office, the tension was just as thick. Whispers floated among employees. Some stared at Gavin with uneasy curiosity. Others hurried past him as if not wanting to get sucked into any drama. He kept his head high, stepping into his CTO's corner office. She pushed a stack of printouts across the desk. "These are from the marketing team's monitoring tools. Tim Bailey's blog has been teasing a major exclusive connected to you. It went viral overnight. People are posting rumors that you had prior knowledge of Serena's pregnancy, like you abandoned her on purpose." Gavin's heart pounded. "That's ridiculous, I never knew. Serena only told me recently." His CTO nodded. "I believe you, but there's talk of an email chain that allegedly proves you were aware of it. Bloggers are already calling you a deadbeat dad. If Tim actually publishes anything tangible, it'll be a feeding frenzy." She paused, scanning his face. "Could these emails be real? Did you—" "No," Gavin said firmly, though the flicker of doubt in her eyes stung. He remembered Tim's hints about a bigger plan. They must have forged something, or they have a partial conversation that's twisted out of context. He glanced at the printouts, dread creeping in. Either way, the damage could be huge. She set her jaw. "We'll fight it with facts, but once something hits the internet, it spreads fast. You'll need a strong rebuttal. And if Tim's got this so-called evidence, you might want to confront him directly." Gavin rubbed his temples, exhaustion creeping in again. "We can't let him or his backers sabotage everything we've built." "Agreed," she said. "But be careful. Don't give Tim more ammunition." A few hours later, Gavin's phone buzzed with a curt text from an unknown number. "Parking garage, west on 9th, 6 p.m. Come alone if you want to see the emails." He stared at the message, heart thumping. The sheer arrogance told him this had to be Tim, or maybe someone close to him. Part of Gavin knew it was likely a trap, but he couldn't let false evidence circulate unchecked. He left the office at dusk, ducking into his car with adrenaline coursing through his veins. The city lights flickered on as he navigated busy streets. Office towers receded behind him, replaced by aging brick walls and warehouses near west on 9th. Eventually, he spotted a nearly empty parking garage. It stood silent, levels lit by sputtering fluorescent bulbs that cast long, eerie shadows. He parked on the ground floor, stepping out cautiously. A single figure stood near a concrete column, arms crossed. As Gavin approached, he recognized Tim Bailey's silhouette, the faint glow of a phone in the reporter's hand. "Brave of you to show up," Tim drawled, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "I guess you care enough about clearing your name." "I'm here for answers," Gavin said tightly. "These emails you're talking about, where'd you get them? Because they're fake." Tim cocked his head. "They sure look real to me. They're dated to the time frame Serena supposedly disappeared. Seems you were well aware of her pregnancy, and from the tone it sounds like you told her to take care of it or keep it quiet." "Harsh words, Gavin." Gavin's stomach roiled. "That's a lie." He took a step forward, anger flashing in his eyes. "Show me." Tim held out his phone, letting the screen's glow reveal a thread of messages labeled with Gavin's name. The text read like a smoking gun, references to the baby, disclaimers that the timing was inconvenient, lines about needing no distractions for the next quarter. Gavin's pulse hammered as he read, horror etched on his face at the forging of his tone. "These are not from me," he rasped. "Someone's setting me up." "Maybe," Tim said with a shrug, pulling the phone back. "But they've got timestamps that match your email signature, a domain that looks legit." "I gotta admit, they'd hold up to a casual observer." Gavin clenched his fists, resisting the urge to lash out. "You can't possibly believe this." Tim smirked. "What I believe doesn't matter. What matters is how quickly a story like this blows up. My audience lives for shocking reveals. And your investors? They'll run the moment they think you orchestrated a cover-up." "Who's feeding you?" Gavin demanded. "You've got a sponsor, right? Someone who wants my company to crash." Tim slid his phone into his jacket. "Guess that's for me to know. I'm just a journalist, though I do enjoy a good payday." He took a step back. "If I were you, I'd prepare a statement. Once I go public, Serena's bound to see these emails. She'll have to pick a side." The mention of Serena sent a chill through Gavin. This was bigger than a business scandal. It attacked the fragile trust he'd rebuilt with her. "You're destroying people's lives," he said, voice trembling with anger, "including 2 innocent kids. Where's your conscience?" Tim shrugged. "Conscience doesn't pay the bills, Lockwood." He nodded to the flickering light overhead. "See you around." With that, Tim strode toward the exit, footsteps echoing on the concrete. Gavin stood there, breathing hard, consumed by rage and dread. The fabricated emails splayed vile accusations at his character, ones that would rip apart any faith Serena had in him. He slammed a hand against the cool concrete pillar. He had to warn her before Tim went public, had to get a digital forensics team to debunk these forgeries. But how quickly could that be done? And would the truth matter once the rumor took flight online? He drove back through the city, mind churning. His phone buzzed repeatedly with notifications from panicked board members who had caught wind of something big about to break. By the time he got home, the first wave of scandal had already reached social media. Posts about a damning revelation regarding Gavin Lockwood's twins, murmurs about him knowing from the start and coldly abandoning them. He sank onto his couch, adrenaline coursing, unable to rest until he called Serena. The line rang and rang. Finally, she picked up, voice tense. "I saw it," she said, no greeting. "He posted excerpts of emails, Gavin. They're so cruel." His stomach lurched at the hurt in her tone. "They're fake, Serena. I swear it. I never wrote those words. I never knew." "How do I know?" she asked, voice unsteady. "They look so real. Even the dates match." He fumbled for a calm explanation, urging her to let him prove the forgery. But she grew quiet, doubt lacing every syllable. He could practically feel the fissure forming between them, created by a carefully planted lie. After several agonizing minutes, the call dropped. Bad reception, or maybe Serena just couldn't handle more. He tried calling back, but it went to voicemail. Time crawled as he paced the penthouse, staring at his phone, waiting for her to answer. Then, hours later, a single voicemail arrived. He recognized Serena's voice, trembling with heartbreak. "I can't keep the girls in this mess. If those emails are true, I need space." The line cut off, and Gavin was left in a silent, crushing panic. Gavin stared at his phone, hand trembling as Serena's voicemail replayed in his mind. She had sounded so defeated, so wounded by the lies Tim Bailey had spread. It was late, and the glow of city lights streamed faintly through the penthouse windows, illuminating the evidence of his spiraling life. Half-empty coffee cups, scattered documents, phone buzzing with frantic updates. He couldn't escape the suffocating pressure of deadlines, investors, and now this new wave of slander. He tried calling Serena's number again, but it went directly to voicemail. Each unanswered ring was a reminder that her trust in him was fragile at best, maybe irreparably broken. The forged emails had done their work, sowing doubt not just in the public mind, but in Serena's heart. Exhausted, he collapsed onto the leather couch, replaying how Tim Bailey had smirked when he revealed the fabricated messages. Gavin's mind buzzed with questions. Who was skillful enough to forge something so authentic-looking? Who stood to benefit from his downfall? More importantly, how could he prove his innocence before everything he cared about slipped away? By morning, the storm had worsened. He woke up to see multiple missed calls from board members and urgent texts from his PR team. Headlines had cropped up on financial news sites. CEO Gavin Lockwood under fire, secret twins and abandoned responsibilities. Chatter escalated across social media, from outraged moral critiques to gleeful schadenfreude. Even some longtime supporters of Gavin's company seemed shaken, worried that his credibility had been torpedoed. He rushed to the office wearing the same wrinkled shirt from the previous day, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Cameras lurked outside the lobby, lenses snapping as soon as he stepped out of his car. Security held the crowd at bay, but the swarm of shouted questions, "Is it true you sent those emails? Why did you hide the twins?" washed over him with relentless force. Inside, he found the atmosphere even grimmer. Employees sidled past in silence, stealing glances at his haggard appearance. There was no escaping the tension, not even in the confines of his own office. A group of investors was already assembled in the conference room. Gavin inhaled sharply, squared his shoulders, and marched in. Most of the board members avoided meeting his gaze. One older man, a heavy investor with a history of outspokenness, cleared his throat. "Gavin," he began, his tone more sorrowful than angry. We've been bombarded with calls and emails questioning your ability to lead. The timing of these revelations couldn't be worse, with our product launch only days away. Gavin raked a hand through his hair. I understand your concerns, he said, but those emails floating around are fake. I've hired a digital forensics team to investigate. A young woman near the end of the table brushed aside a stack of papers. We keep hearing that, but the evidence seems damning, and your personal life is overshadowing everything. The stock is already taking a hit. Gavin's jaw tensed. It's a coordinated attack. I suspect a rival investor is fueling Tim Bailey to sabotage us. I'm close to finding proof. The older man shook his head. Close doesn't cut it, Gavin. If we can't quash this scandal, we'll have no choice but to protect the company. Some of us are considering a vote to remove you as CEO, at least temporarily. The words fell like a sledgehammer. Gavin opened his mouth to protest, but he saw the steeled expressions around the table. They weren't bluffing. They were preparing for damage control. He tried to steady his voice. Give me one more chance, he pleaded. 24 hours. Let me present undeniable evidence these emails are forged. If I fail, I'll step aside willingly. The board members exchanged uncertain glances. After a long pause, the older investor finally nodded. All right, 24 hours. But after that, we can't risk further fallout. When they adjourned, Gavin slumped against the corridor wall, mind racing. He needed something solid, digital footprints, an IP address, a confession from Tim or his backer. Without it, the board would oust him, and he'd lose the credibility to protect Serena and the twins. He hurried to meet his software team in a cramped side office used for product testing. A handful of exhausted programmers were hunched over laptops, combing through server logs and the metadata in the leaked emails. They glanced up as he entered, their eyes reflecting both sympathy and stress. So far, one of them said, we've found suspicious anomalies in the email headers, like they were routed through an overseas domain used for spam. But it's not enough to prove you didn't write them. Gavin grimaced. Keep digging. Check if the company mail server even registered any account activity at those times. They nodded, diving back into the code. There was no guarantee they'd find the smoking gun in time. Gavin's phone buzzed again, a text from his legal advisor saying the firm had just received notice that someone might be filing a lawsuit against him for paternal negligence. The claim was vague, but it still spiked his blood pressure. Whether or not it was real, the threat alone would amplify the media uproar. He considered calling Serena again to beg her to believe him, but a gnawing fear crept in. If she truly believed the lies, she might be too hurt to talk. And if Tim's conspiracy was working, she might think Gavin was only calling to manipulate her. He braced himself, sending a short, desperate text. I'm going to prove these emails are fake, I swear it. Please keep the girls safe until I do. She didn't respond. The hours bled into the afternoon. Gavin felt besieged by both personal and professional crises. A few employees asked if they should postpone the product launch. Others tiptoed around him, uncertain if the entire company was on the verge of collapse. Finally, a timid knock sounded on his office door. His CTO stepped in, face grim. I dug around, she said quietly. There's a rumor swirling that an investor from a rival firm, someone with deep pockets, has been funneling money to Tim Bailey. I can't confirm it yet, but I found some unusual stock trades. It looks like that investor's been shorting our shares, banking on them plummeting. Gavin set his jaw. That means they want maximum damage. They're not just out to humiliate me, they want our share price to crash so they can profit. She nodded. Exactly. Or maybe even swoop in to buy controlling shares on the cheap. Either way, they'll do anything to discredit you and the company. Before he could respond, one of the programmers hurried in, breathless. We found something. A partial data trail suggests the emails were created on an unregistered server linked to the same IP address we flagged for suspicious login attempts last month. Coincidentally, the same time we faced that hacking scare. Gavin's pulse quickened. That's huge. Can we tie it to Tim or the rival investor? Not conclusively, but it's a lead. If we can gain physical access to that server or track who paid for it, we might link it to whoever forged the emails. He fished out his phone, adrenaline surging. I have to bring this to the board. It's not bulletproof, but it might buy us more time. No sooner had he turned toward the door than the phone vibrated with an incoming call from a hidden number. Instinct told him to answer. On the line, a distorted voice whispered, "You're closer than you think. If you want hard evidence, meet me at the warehouse on Riverfront tonight. 10 p.m. Don't bring anyone else." A chill raced down Gavin's spine. "Who is this?" he demanded. The call ended abruptly. His CTO watched him, brow furrowed. Some anonymous tip? He exhaled, stepping back. It might be. Maybe someone from the inside who wants to come clean but is scared. She bit her lip. Or it's a trap. Gavin's gaze dropped to the phone. The entire situation seethed with danger and deception, but he couldn't ignore a direct lead that might clear his name. If there was even a slim chance, he had to take it. For Serena, for the girls, for the company teetering on the brink. He paced the office, heart pounding, until another text pinged. No cops, no backup. Come alone. The address was near the old industrial district, far from the usual bustle. It matched the location Tim had used once or twice for shady meetings. But this was different. His mind raced with conflicting thoughts. The risk of going alone, the possibility of confirming once and for all who was paying Tim to sabotage him, and the fear that he'd arrive only to be confronted or blackmailed again. Yet the alternative, doing nothing, guaranteed he'd lose everything. Just as he set the phone aside, it buzzed again. This time, no distortion, just an unknown number. When he answered, a trembling voice said, "Gavin, I can't keep this secret. The rival investor is meeting Tim Bailey at a private warehouse tonight to finalize their arrangement. If you want to save everything, you have to go now." Gavin gripped his phone tightly, adrenaline pulsing with each heartbeat as he read the urgent message. The rival investor is meeting Tim Bailey at a private warehouse tonight to finalize their arrangement. If you want to save everything, you have to go now. He stood in his office's dim corridor, heart hammering in his chest. This was it, his last chance to uncover the truth behind the falsified emails that had nearly destroyed his life. Without proof, the board would have him removed by tomorrow. Without proof, Serena and the twins might slip away for good, believing he'd knowingly abandoned them. He slipped out of the building quietly, not wanting to draw attention from co-workers or lingering reporters. The night sky was a tapestry of murky clouds and a waning moon. His car's engine roared as he headed to the industrial district, a part of town dotted with silent warehouses and unlit streets. Street lamps cast sporadic pools of orange glow, leaving wide swaths of darkness where anyone, could be hiding. The directions in the tip-off led him to a massive structure by the docks. Rusted metal walls loomed overhead, the place abandoned except for a few dusty cars parked near a side entrance. Gavin parked at a discreet distance and approached on foot, nerves on edge. The muffled sound of voices echoed inside, bouncing against hollow walls. He pressed himself against the corrugated metal and listened. A voice he recognized as Tim Bailey's rang out, full of sharp confidence. "You promised a hefty bonus if I delivered a real scandal. I held up my end. You have the emails, the headlines, everything." Another voice responded, quieter but dripping with authority. Gavin's suspicion was confirmed. It was the rival investor he'd only heard rumors about. "Our arrangement was you'd ruin Gavin's reputation, drive down the company's value, create chaos. I want to buy in at a fraction of the current share price, then push him out. But the stock hasn't crashed as much as we need. He's fighting back." Tim scoffed. "He can't prove a thing. Those emails look rock solid. But that forensics talk is getting loud. If they trace it back to this place, we'll both be exposed." Gavin's chest tightened. So this was the core of it, a conspiracy that meshed corporate greed and personal vendetta. They wanted to buy his startup for cheap, faking emails that painted him as a cruel, uncaring father to tank the company's public image. He steadied himself, swallowing the anger that roiled within him. Peeking in through a grime-streaked window, he saw Tim and the rival investor standing near a makeshift table littered with papers and a laptop. Tim's camera sat to one side, still wearing its attached microphone like a prize weapon. Gavin realized if he could capture them on video, admitting to the forgery or the sabotage, that alone would be a powerful counterattack. But he had to be careful. Storming in without a plan might leave him empty-handed. He crept around to an unlatched door, carefully easing it open. Inside, the space smelled of old oil and damp concrete. He hid behind a towering shelf filled with rusted equipment, heart pounding as he activated the camera on his phone. All he needed was a few sentences of confession, something that would prove their collusion. He listened as the investor's impatient tone rose. If Gavin manages to prove those emails are fake, this entire operation collapses. We need more, or we leak something even bigger. Tim's laugh was hollow. I've already used every trick. Without new material, I'll just milk the scandal we have. The public loves a good fatherhood drama, especially if they think he walked away from his own kids. Anger flared in Gavin's gut. The lines about his daughters made his blood run hot. He watched, phone camera rolling, capturing each admission. He waited until he had enough to obliterate their scheme. Then he stepped forward, voice echoing through the silent chamber. That's enough, he said, every syllable taut with fury. I've heard all I need. Tim whirled around, eyes widening when he realized Gavin was filming. The rival investor took a step back, face twisting with fury. Me, Gavin finished, advancing slowly, phone held high. Looks like the real scandal is right here, a coordinated effort to destroy my name and cripple my company. Tim made a grab for the phone, but Gavin jerked his arm away. Stay back, he warned, voice shaking with pent-up emotion. I'm done letting you intimidate me or my family. The investor cursed under his breath, adjusting the watch on his wrist in a show of bravado. We can work something out, he said, forcing a thin smile. You're a businessman, Lockwood. You know how deals go. Gavin shook his head, heart pounding. Not this kind of deal. You targeted my children, forged evidence to make me a villain. There's no walking that back. He tapped his phone, ensuring it was still recording. I have you both on camera discussing your entire scheme. Tim's face went pale, all his cocksure swagger gone. You can't prove we forged anything, he spat desperately, but it was hollow. He glanced at the investor, who looked equally stunned. Gavin closed in, chest tight with anger and triumph. My team's been gathering digital footprints. All I needed was confirmation it came from you. Now I have it. Before anyone could react, the sound of car engines approached outside, and two uniformed officers stepped into the warehouse, guns holstered but ready. Gavin's legal counsel trailed behind them, having followed at Gavin's request once he'd learned the meeting's location. Relief surged through him. This confrontation had been risky, but now he had backup to ensure the evidence wouldn't vanish. Tim and the investor both tried to protest, hurling half-baked excuses, but the officers calmly confiscated laptops and papers. Tim sputtered threats of defamation suits, his face red with panic. The investor, proud facade still in place, refused to speak further without a lawyer. But they were cornered, and everyone knew it. Gavin felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Even if the legal wheels took time to turn, he'd torn the mask off their conspiracy and captured enough proof to vindicate himself. But one vital question remained. How much damage had already been done? Would Serena still believe in him, or had Tim's fabrications taken root too deeply? Leaving the police to finish up, Gavin drove straight to a local news station that had once been neutral about his situation. Despite the late hour, an after-hours producer scrambled to assemble a camera crew when they saw the raw footage Gavin carried. The on-air anchor recognized the explosive potential of the story. A rival investor caught plotting to sabotage a major tech startup, forging personal emails to publicly shame the CEO. By the time the segment went live, Gavin was seated under bright studio lights, adrenaline coursing through him. The anchor gave him a chance to speak. With every camera lens pointed his way, he explained, voice hoarse with relief, how the emails had been forged, how Tim Bailey had used them to incite scandal. He maintained a calm composure until the anchor showed the snippet of Tim's recorded admission. The public loves a good fatherhood drama, and it was all there, undeniable. Within minutes, the breaking story spread online. Reaction was swift. Outraged tweets directed at Tim, at the investor, messages of apology from those who had doubted Gavin. It wasn't a complete restoration of his reputation yet, but it was a start, something he could build on. He stepped out of the news studio into the cool night air, phone buzzing incessantly, congratulatory texts from board members, employees' expressions of relief, stunned calls from some who had believed the worst. A single message caught his eye. Serena's number. He answered, bracing himself. Her voice trembled with emotion. "I saw the broadcast, Gavin." His heart thudded. Do you believe me now?" She was quiet for a moment, as though fighting back tears. "Yes. I'm so sorry I doubted you. Those emails looked so genuine, but I should have trusted you." He closed his eyes, flooding with relief. "It's not your fault," he murmured. "They went out of their way to deceive us." Serena hesitated. "Can you come over? The girls are asleep, but I want to see you." "Yes," he said, voice thick. "I'm on my way." He drove through the near-empty streets, mind still reeling from the whirlwind of the night. When he arrived, Serena stood in the doorway, arms crossed, not in anger, but in a posture of vulnerability and cautious hope. The moment he stepped inside, she closed the distance and hugged him. He felt her trembling, realized she was crying. He held her tightly, letting everything, fear, anger, confusion, spill away in that embrace. They talked in hushed voices, sitting close on the couch. The twins slept in the next room, unaware of the shift happening. Serena admitted how painful it had been to see those vile words attributed to him, how deeply it had stabbed at her past insecurities. Gavin reiterated his promise to be there for the children, and for her, no matter what storms came next. At dawn, the first rays of sunlight streamed through the curtains. Serena rose to check on the twins, returning moments later with them holding her hands. The girls rubbed their eyes, blinking at Gavin, sense of wonder dancing in their sleepy faces. He knelt down, arms open, and they piled into a shy but heartfelt hug. Even Serena's eyes shone with tears as she watched him cradle them like something precious and irreplaceable. Word of Gavin's exoneration continued to spread throughout the day. The board retracted its threat to remove him, the stock steadied, and Tim Bailey's blog was taken offline pending a legal investigation. The rogue investor had no choice but to lawyer up, battered by scandal and the real possibility of criminal charges. Meanwhile, the rest of Gavin's company, loyal employees and relieved stakeholders, breathed a collective sigh of relief. That evening, at a short press conference, Gavin calmly outlined the evidence that cleared his name. He spoke briefly, then introduced Serena, who stepped forward, though still overwhelmed by the media glare. She confirmed that Gavin had been there for her and the girls the moment he learned the truth, how everything else was lies meant to tear them apart. Cameras flashed, reporters jostled for quotes, but neither Gavin nor Serena felt threatened by it anymore. They stood side by side, no longer afraid. When the conference ended, Gavin guided his new family out through the throng of cameras, protective arm around Serena and the twins, flanked by security. Yet the paparazzi's frenzy seemed almost anticlimactic now that the real story was out. As they reached the street, the twins lit up with relief, and Gavin felt a wave of gratitude for the second chance he'd nearly missed. He bent down to lift the girls, each of them clutching a hand around his shoulder. Serena stood close, tears of joy shining in her eyes. A wave of emotion hit Gavin, and he realized that for the first time in weeks, he felt truly free. The lies had been exposed, and though scars remained, they could begin to heal together. The cameras capture the embracing family. Gavin, with tears in his eyes, holds his daughters tight and murmurs, "I lost so much time, but I promise I'll never let you go again." The future is finally theirs to shape, together. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.